Just a few days ago, I posted my first video with a first look at the brand new Leica SL2-S. And in this video, I want to look in particular in resolution. Do I like the 24 megapixels? And I want to look into the multi-shot option, which delivers almost 100 megapixels. Again, I got the camera for free from Saturday evening when the shop closed to Monday morning from my friends from the Leica store in Zurich. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate the support you provide for my reviews and my channel. During the days when I was looking into the resolution of the SL2-S, it was very foggy outside, so I decided to do an indoor shooting, and I also thought I want to do something special and mount a Canon EF macro lens with a Novoflex adapter to the Leica SL2-S. The lens I'm talking about is the Canon macro lens EF 100mm. Widest open aperture is f2.8. It's a so-called L lens. It also has an in-lens image stabilization included, and it's one of the best macro lenses I know. I've worked with this lens for many years and with adapters on different systems, not exclusively on Canon, of course. The adapter I use to mount this to the Leica SL2-S is from Novoflex, and is a very cool adapter because it has electronic contacts connecting the lens and the camera body from the SL2 or SL2-S, and also features autofocus, full control over aperture and all the parameters you want to control on the lens. Clearly for me, autofocus in this particular shooting situation is not necessary because in macro mode and with macro shootings, I typically go for manual focus anyway. The subject I'm going to shoot is an Omega watch called The Dark Side of the Moon. Long history, long background. You can Google this all at the Omega website or in reviews of this watch. And I'm quite curious to see how the 24 megapixel and the multi-shot option of the SL2-S set the details of this beautiful watch into scene. So this is how the shooting scene looks from behind the camera. I had to mount some LED light into the hot shoe of the Leica SL2-S because the maximum exposure time on the multi-shot option is 1 second. So I had to restrict myself here. And I'm going to comment on my shooting parameters in a moment. But one thing is clear, this Canon EF macro lens has such a shallow depth of field that I have to close the aperture fairly well, and then I have to make compromises because I don't want diffraction to kick in too aggressively. Looking into the shooting parameters here, I'm on fully manual mode. Aperture I have chosen now to be in f16. This gives me a little more depth of field, and very likely a little bit of diffraction will kick in already, but not too aggressively, I guess. 1 second exposure time for the single shot and the multi-shot option, because on the multi-shot option that's the maximum I can get. Base ISO of the SL2-S, which is 100. And then of course the other parameters are straightforward, like spot metering and so on. And I go for the single shot first. So let's go here to self timer, 2 seconds. And if you look into what I have here with my watch, that's kind of the best compromise. If I focus here forth and back with the focus ring, you see by means of the focus peaking how this is changing the sharp areas of the image. But I think this is very likely the best compromise we get here. So let's go for that one and let's take the first shot. Let's have a look and let's see what we got here. Yeah, I think that looks good. I think that looks really good. It's pretty sharp. Very good. We keep these settings here and now go for the multi-shot option. So I go to drive mode, go into multi-shot, and the multi-shot option has already automatically embedded a self timer. You see this here. If you go to menu and then drive mode and then multi-shot, you can choose between off, 2 second and 12 second. I always have the self timer on for the multi-shot option here. So let's go for 2 seconds. And let's go back here into my shooting scene. And now let's take the multi-shot. 2 second self timer. And then it starts to take frames, and these frames will be stacked together in the camera. So I don't have to do this on my computer in post. And by the way, if I would not be in a sturdy shooting situation, the camera would indicate this to me by a clear warning. And you need to have the Leica SL2 and the SL2-S on a tripod in order to use the multi-shot option. Otherwise it will not work, and definitely the image will not look in the way you want it to. So let's have a look here. Oh yes, that looks really good. It's very sharp. I'm curious to see if this is in any way even better than the 24 megapixel image on the single shot we had, but we'll find out in a moment. Let's go into post and let's have a look at the results here. So here we see the two images. On the left hand side we have the multi-shot image. It has 96 megapixels, which means in terms of resolution 12K times 8K. And on the right hand side we have the single shot with 24 megapixels and the resolution is 6K times 4K. Let's start with the right hand side, and the single shot image, 24 megapixels, 6K times 4K resolution. And if we go back some years, 24 megapixels is a very huge resolution and it's sufficient for large prints. Some very recently introduced cameras like the Sony A7S Mark III get along with much less, with 12 megapixels. So 24 megapixel is a good resolution. What I was interested in is how much sharpness and clarity do I get out of these pictures here, and it looks pretty impressive. And I said this many times when I looked into Leica cameras and Leica sensors. Leica seems to have somehow on their sensors what I would call deep pixels. So even if you go to 200%, for instance, let's do this here quickly. So this is about a little more than 200% here. These images look still very sharp. There is no fuzziness. It's a very strong, I think, delivery we see here in terms of resolution. Let's stick to the 100% magnification or zoom here, or crop, or how you want to call that. And let's have a look a little bit around. It looks really good, 19 joules here. You see here some serial numbers printed in, whatever that is. And here a nice, another, I would say, statement from that Apollo 8 mission. We'll see you on the other side. And the whole image is really good. You could print this at 200% easily if you wanted, and by this get very large prints. But the 24 megapixel, in my opinion, on the Leica SL2-S fully deliver. Now turning our attention to the multi-shot on the left hand side, and 96 megapixels clearly is a huge resolution. I said before that you need to have a sturdy shooting situation on a tripod, because any movement in the scene, any shake of the camera will ruin the picture. Now in this watch, clearly we have some moving parts. So if I go, for instance, to this part here, you see some fuzziness coming from movements of pieces inside, because now we have not only, as on the right hand side, a 1 second exposure, but we have several 1 second exposures stacked together, and that clearly creates this fuzziness, what you see here. But in general is also a very sharp image. Let's look into the Omega logo here. Very nice, very good, and now at 4 times the resolution, because 24 times 4 is 96, and the number of pixels in X and Y resolution doubles, so you have all in a factor of 4 in terms of resolution. So that is really nice. And I think all the details on that watch, in the way the multi-shot option was carrying it over here, they look really good. And I've done multi-shot on various camera brands, and in many ways, very often, there are artifacts or things in the image which shouldn't be there. And the Leica SL2, as I showed in the video on my channel, but also the Leica SL2-S here, they fully deliver on these multi-shot options, and it looks really impressive what you get here. Clearly here, if you print this at 100%, then you have a very large print, and you can work with this in various ways. Gives you a lot of flex to have that multi-shot option. The only condition is you need to have a sturdy tripod, and the scene you are going to shoot should have no moving bits and pieces. Let's now quickly lock this in here, so that when I zoom in on one image, the other one is following. And if I go here to the multi-shot and click on this Omega logo, then you get an impression how much more resolution you get when you see this side by side. And clearly on the left hand side, the 96 megapixels, they provide you much more flex than what you have here. And I should say, these moving parts in the watch, they do not ruin the macro shot here. And despite the fact that the depth of field was shallow and that I had to use an aperture of f16, and we don't have a focus stacking option in camera on the Leica SL2 or Leica SL2-S, it is nevertheless a very nice picture. And on both sides it looks pretty good. You can use them both. You can go for the 24 megapixel or you go for the 96 if you need it. Quite nice result. I think that new camera, as I said in my first video on the Leica SL2-S, is a very promising piece of technology. I highly recommend people to look into this. If this could be an alternative for you based on the much more enhanced video capabilities compared to the SL2, maybe a good choice if you are a hybrid shooter or videographer. If you are a pure photographer, then you might have a more difficult time to decide, because the SL2-S has very likely in practice the better autofocus for sports and action, but 47 megapixels natively on the sensor of the SL2 are also a good value proposition. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me your thumbs up. You are invited to subscribe to my channel. There's more to come, in particular now in the next weeks over the Christmas days where I have a bit more time. And of course, in the meanwhile, stay safe and healthy and peace out.